Okay, let's go to our next caller, Alan Riepsamer in The Hague in the Netherlands. Your point, please.
Hi, Mr. Dawkins. The thing is, I don't really care what people believe in as long as they keep it to themselves or not bother other people with it, or worse, force their particular rules upon others. Isn't it your view as well that religion needs to retreat into the personal space rather than being in the public space?
Yes, I think that if everybody took the view that you do, the world would be a much better place if people kept their religion to themselves. Unfortunately, they don't. An awful lot of people feel the urge to impose their religion on other people, and that's really one of the things that has got some of us rather riled up. In case anybody thinks that I'm trying to impose my lack of religion on anybody, I'm really not. You can read my book if you want. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm not doing any imposing.
Alan Riepsamer, when you talk about taking religion more into personal space, are you thinking there of what people call nowadays very often spirituality? Mysticism goes by various terms. If you like, very much a sort of new and growing phenomenon of religion in the East and in the West as well. And if you are, Richard Dawkins, do you accept that this is something that can be entirely different? This deals with a form of human understanding, or something, if you like, that is mysticism of that kind, can be beyond human understanding, the explanations of science altogether.
Yes, I have no problem with that, and it's what I call Einsteinian religion. Einstein's religion, he used the word religion, and he even used the word God, was all about the deep mysteries in the universe. So Einstein used the word God as a symbol for that which we don't understand, and it's perfectly okay, I think, to be mystical about that. But I thought that what the caller was talking about was people keeping religion to themselves rather than imposing it on other people, as in interfering with stem cell research, interfering with the rights of gay people and things like that, which they do, because religious people very often love to talk about sin, which means things that the rest of us would regard as private.
Right, we'll need to move on, I'm afraid, and bring in Caroline Macklin from Cheltenham. Briefly, please, your point, your question to Richard Dawkins.
Yes, hi. I'm concerned that policymakers listen to people of all different faiths, who obviously their aim is to exert influence. But as far as I'm aware, the politicians don't listen to groups of atheists. How do you think we can rectify this? And just one other point, how do atheists obtain the same protection that religious groups do currently?
I can't
Well, the point was that a question as to whether politicians listen sufficiently anyway to atheists. I mean, you would probably feel they don't, but should they be doing so?
Well, I think especially in America they don't. In America, notoriously, and it's more or less impossible for an atheist to get elected. There are plenty of lobbies in America which are very influential on congressmen, and the one potential lobby, which actually is a pretty powerful one numerically, but totally powerless in terms of actual political power, the atheist lack of lobby is the one they never listen to. I think in Britain we don't have the same problem. Many of our members of Parliament are obviously atheists, and I don't think we have the same problem, although it is a remarkable fact that bishops still sit in the House of Lords ex officio.
Okay, we'll need to move on, I'm afraid. We're close to our time running out. But let me briefly bring in Philip Stevens in North Wales, here in the United Kingdom. Your question, please, to Richard Dawkins.
Hello, I'd like to ask what Professor Dawkins thinks of the teachings of Christ, which call out for peace and forgiveness. And I'd like to ask him what he thinks of Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and more recently the Buddhist monks who led pro-democracy marches in Burma earlier this year, all of whom have a message of peace and tolerance, and all of whom have a deep religious faith.
So, okay, what about religion promoting peace rather than, as we were discussing earlier, its connection with violence?
I have enormous admiration for individual human beings who promote peace as opposed to promoting violence. Some of those individuals happen to be religious, such as Martin Luther King. Some of them don't, such as Bertrand Russell. It's the individual and what they actually promote that, to me, matters. And I'm not trying to make a list of religious people or non-religious people and count them up. I'm more concerned with what's true, and that's my main concern. But as far as morals are concerned, you can point to as many good atheists as to as many good Christians and Hindus.
Okay, Philip Stevens, briefly.
Well, I have great respect for Professor Dawkins' views, I think they are valid, but I don't agree with them. I think religion can be a great force for good, and it often is more of a force for good, in my opinion, than it is a force for evil.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Cutting off because I want to go to an email that's come in while we've been on air from Sam in Cambridge, who says, if God doesn't exist, why do you, Richard Dawkins, think society has created him?
Well, I think it's not difficult to see why people would make up something as an explanatory device. We come into the world, it's obviously a very beautiful place, a very mysterious place, and we're faced with the question of where does it all come from? And it's natural for humans who are used to seeing humans make things. We're used to seeing houses that are built by people. We're used to seeing cars that are made by people, hand axes that are made by people. It's natural to think that the world was made by somebody as well. And until Darwin came along, that was getting on for being a reasonable hypothesis. It was never very reasonable, but it was only when Darwin came along and completely blew it out of the water that it became completely satisfying to be an atheist. We now do have an explanation for where things come from. There are other reasons why it's psychologically satisfying to people to believe in God. People feel insecure, they want the reassurance of feeling a kind of father figure looking after them. So there are plenty of psychological reasons why humans might have invented God.
One other email we've had in just in the last few moments from John, who asked you whether you feel more pessimistic now.
Pessimistic now than what, I wonder? Than when I started on the programme, do you think?
Possibly, but over time, I think, for example, than, say, in the 60s.
Oh, no, I mean, I think I'm an optimist, and I think that that the world is a wonderful place. Obviously, there are things to be pessimistic about, but that has nothing to do with religion, one way or the other. I think. I mean, there are things like global warming that we have to worry about. I am very pessimistic about the grip that religion has on people's minds, and I suppose that's one respect in which I am a bit more pessimistic, because it's in the 60s it looked as though the world was going to come to its senses, and just at the moment it doesn't look as though it is.
Are you worried, though, that an effect of your stand, your very public one with the sales of these books, could be to further divisions within religions and between the religious world and that of non-belief? I
don't know. I think it's perhaps a good thing that there are some books like mine and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris which are fairly outspoken. I notice you use the word outspoken in your introduction to me. Outspoken atheist. You didn't call the Pope an outspoken Christian. Okay. But there are plenty of other books which take a more moderate stance. I think there's room for all.
Okay. Richard Dawkins, thank you very much indeed. And that is all we've got time for today. Many thanks to Professor Richard Dawkins and to everyone who's taken part. And I'm sorry if you didn't make it onto the programme. You can still take part in the debate on our website, bbcnews.com/haveyourSay. We'll be back next week. Do join us again. But for now, goodbye from me, Mike Waldridge, and the rest of the team in London.